The first day I joined tuition, I didn't expect anything unusual. It was just another part of my daily routine, sitting quietly at a small table while my teacher, Mr. Adil, explained each formula with calm patience. He wasn't like other teachers. There was something in his voice that made even the toughest topics sound simple, something that made me feel at ease as weeks passed, and slowly, our lessons started to feel different. We began talking beyond books, small conversations about life, dreams, and what it feels like to be misunderstood. He listened carefully, never interrupting, never judging. There was a kindness in his eyes that made me forget the world outside that room. I didn't realize it at first, but somewhere between numbers and notes, I had started waiting for every tuition evening. Sometimes he would smile while explaining something and say, "You're better than you think." Those words stayed in my mind long after I went home. I couldn't tell if it was just respect or something deeper, but I felt something warm growing quietly inside me, something I didn't dare to name. One evening, the sky turned dark earlier than usual. Clouds gathered, and by the time class ended, it had started raining. I stood by the door, waiting for it to stop, when he came and said softly, "Don't go now. It's not safe to walk in this weather. Wait for a while." I nodded, trying not to look nervous, though my heart was beating a little faster. We sat inside the small room while the sound of rain filled the air. He made tea, and we talked, not about studies, but about life. He told me how teaching wasn't just a job for him, it was his way of escaping loneliness. I didn't know what to say, so I just listened. There was a quiet honesty in his words that made me see him not just as a teacher but as a person with his own fears and hopes. Time slipped away. The rain got heavier, the streets outside disappeared under a silver curtain, and the air grew colder. He laughed and said, "Looks like the rain doesn't want you to leave tonight." I smiled, but my chest felt tight. Something about that moment, the quiet, the closeness, the warmth of tea felt different. When our eyes met, it wasn't awkward or uncomfortable. It was silent, but full of meaning neither of us could explain. I looked away quickly, pretending to check my phone, but my heart wouldn't calm down. That night, something changed between us. It wasn't spoken, it wasn't planned, but it was there, a quiet connection that felt too strong to ignore. As I finally left after the rain slowed, I turned once more to say goodbye. He smiled and said softly, "Take care of yourself." His voice lingered in my ears all the way home. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about his smile, his words, and the strange calm I felt when he was around. I didn't understand what it meant then, but something inside me whispered that this was just the beginning of a story I would never forget. Days turned into weeks, and our bond kept growing in ways neither of us expected. Tuition no longer felt like a class, it felt like a small escape from the noise of the world. Every evening, I looked forward to those quiet hours, the smell of chalk, the ticking clock, and his calm voice explaining things I barely heard anymore because my mind was somewhere else. He had started sharing small pieces of his life. One day, while solving a question, he paused and said quietly, "I'm getting engaged soon." His tone didn't sound happy. I looked up, unsure what to say. "Congratulations," I whispered, but the word felt heavy on my tongue. He smiled faintly and said, "It's what my family wants." Then he went back to teaching as if nothing had happened, but his eyes looked far away. After that day, I noticed a change in him. He became quieter, more thoughtful. Sometimes he would stop mid-sentence, look at me, and then smile as if trying to hide something. I tried not to read too much into it, but deep down, I could feel something unspoken between us, something that both of us pretended not to see. One evening, I reached tuition early. The house was quiet, only a small lamp glowed in the corner. He was sitting on the sofa, lost in thought. When he saw me, he smiled and said, "You came early today." I nodded, placing my books on the table. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. Then, out of nowhere, he said softly, "You make this place feel less lonely." The words hit me like a whisper I wasn't ready for. My heart started to race, but I didn't know how to respond. He looked at me for a moment, then looked away, almost embarrassed by what he had just said. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could, he said quietly, "Don't worry. I just wanted you to know." That evening, the air felt different, heavier, filled with something I couldn't name. We didn't study much. Instead, we talked about everything and nothing. He told me about his dreams, about how he once wanted to become a writer but ended up teaching. I listened, fascinated, feeling like I was seeing a side of him no one else had ever seen. When it got late and I began to pack my bag, he stopped me. "Wait," he said softly. "Don't go yet. I want you to stay for a while." There was no pressure in his voice, just a quiet sincerity that made me sit down again. He went to make tea, and when he came back, he handed me a cup and said, "You remind me what it feels like to be understood." We sat in silence for a long time, sipping tea, the clock ticking softly in the background. I could feel his eyes on me now and then, and each time, I felt my heart tremble a little more. The world outside seemed to fade, only the dim light, the warmth of the room, and the rhythm of our breathing remained. He looked at me again and said, "Sometimes, life brings people together for reasons we can't explain." I nodded slowly, unable to speak. The air between us felt charged, fragile, almost sacred. I didn't know where this connection would lead, but I knew one thing: that night, nothing felt ordinary anymore. When I finally left, he walked me to the door. The sky was clear, the streets quiet. As I stepped outside, he said in a low voice, "I'll see you tomorrow." But the way he said it made it sound like a promise, one that would change everything soon. The next morning felt different, quieter than usual. The air outside was still, and even the sunlight seemed softer. I walked to tuition slowly, my mind crowded with thoughts I couldn't name. I didn't know what last night truly meant, but something inside me told me that nothing between us would ever be the same again. When I reached his house, the door was already open. He was standing near the window, staring outside. For a moment, he didn't notice I was there. When he turned, there was a small smile on his face, but his eyes looked tired, as if he hadn't slept. I sat down quietly, waiting for him to speak. After a long silence, he said, "I couldn't stop thinking last night." I didn't answer. My hands were trembling slightly. "You're special," he continued softly, "more than you realize. But what's happening between us, it's not fair to you. Or to anyone." His words felt heavy, but his voice was gentle. I wanted to say something, anything, but I couldn't. I just looked at him, trying to read the truth in his eyes. He sighed and came closer, sitting across from me. "I care about you," he said. "That's the truth. But caring sometimes means stepping back before we hurt each other." Those words stung, even though they were kind. My throat felt tight. "So, is this the end?" I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me for a long moment before replying, "No, not the end. Just the moment where we decide what kind of people we want to be." The rest of the lesson passed in silence. We both tried to act normal, but the air between us was filled with unspoken emotions. Every glance, every pause carried a weight neither of us could ignore. When the time came to leave, I hesitated by the door, wishing for one more moment, one more word that could make everything clear. He walked me out as always, the afternoon sun glowing softly on his face. "You'll do well in life," he said, smiling faintly. "Just don't lose your kindness." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As I turned to go, he added, "And remember, some connections don't need to last forever to mean something." That night, I sat by my window, replaying every moment we had shared, every smile, every conversation, every silence. I realized that love doesn't always end with togetherness. Sometimes it's about learning, growing, and accepting that even short stories can leave a lifetime of meaning. I never went back for tuition after that. Exams came and went, and life slowly returned to normal, but a part of me stayed in that small room where I first learned that love can be quiet, pure, and complicated all at once. Years later, I still remember him, not with pain, but with gratitude. He taught me more than any book ever could. He taught me that love isn't about breaking boundaries, but understanding them. It's about knowing when to hold on and when to let go, and even though that night changed everything, it also became the reason I learned who I truly was, someone who once found a beautiful connection in the most unexpected place, and carried its warmth forever.